Hi there, leaders. This week is all about creating a supportive and inclusive and exciting culture where people feel a sense of belonging and they feel loved and they feel inspired to want to be a part of the organization and a part of the team. And that's your job as a leader to create that. It doesn't just happen by accident. And this week is all about how to be intentional about that. So let's look at some of that research right now. One of the very first pieces of research is in Nordhaus. What is a constructive climate? According to that research, we've got four main components: provide structure, clarify norms, build cohesiveness, and promote standards of excellence. You can read this in Nordhaus, so I'm not going to talk more about that, but I wanted you to be aware of some very similar research. This is from Gallup. Now, according to Gallup, there are four things that followers want from leaders: trust, compassion, stability, and hope. So think about what these four things mean. What does it mean to develop trust as a leader? One of the ways you can earn trust from your followers is simply over time, following through on what you do, demonstrating that you have integrity, that what you say is really what you mean. And when things change and you can't follow through on something that you had promised, being accountable to that and transparent. Transparency really builds trust. Showing compassion, a lot of that's done through just having close relationships with your team, not setting yourself apart. And then stability. Stability has to do with having procedures that people are aware of. And there's some personality types that really need a lot of freedom and autonomy. I'm one of them personally, but I know that I work better within boundaries. So make sure people know what those boundaries are and what's expected of them. That provides so much stability. But also as a leader, depending on what your role is, your responsibility is to really help people feel a sense of financial stability and a sense of abundance, and to know that everything is going to be okay because they've seen how you make good decisions and how you create a stable environment. And then finally, providing hope. A lot of this is our shared values and inspirations, but this is the mission, right? And providing inspiration for the future. So part of the point of having a culture and a climate that's positive and productive is so that everybody really feels like they belong and you have a sense of wellness, both each individual at the individual level and at the communal level and at the organizational level, because that's what makes us productive. Then the organization is going to thrive. Then our work is going to be done well. But that's a lot harder than it sounds, because typically there are people who feel a little bit left out. Sometimes it's overt, sometimes it's subtle, and it's often because of diversity within an organization. There are so many different types of diversity: culture, gender identification, physical ability, ethnicity, race, socioeconomic background. And leaders have to be incredibly aware and sensitive to all of that diversity and how to create a sense of belonging amongst everybody. This is a slide that shows the impact of diversity on a company. There are actually business reasons for making sure that you have an environment that is diverse. For one thing, that you're not just hiring or including people that are like you or that look like you, but you're seeking out diversity in as many forms as possible, and that you have that environment of conclusion. So this is based on some really great research. One is increased creativity. In particular here, this is about gender diversity, and companies that have more gender diversity demonstrate more creativity and innovation, which of course is a high priority in today's workforce. We outcompete other schools and other organizations and other businesses by being innovative and one step ahead. There are better outcomes in general, better performance. There's more workplace happiness. People actually show more enjoyment when they have a diverse team. I talked about staying ahead of the game. That has to also do with creativity. And then there's also a wider talent pool to choose from. I happen to live in Oregon here at Southern Oregon University, which is an incredibly white environment. And so that further limits the number of BIPOC people, or people of color, people of different racial backgrounds in particular, who don't feel comfortable coming into a white space. So it really limits our talent pool of the people who want to work here and who feel comfortable. And then stakeholder support. So we find that also people are more interested in coming to our school when they see that it's diverse, or buying our product, or being a part of our organization when that diversity is there. Now, diversity only works if you're able to create a sense of belonging and a culture that has that positive culture. So let's think about some of those features and aspects. This is from Nordhaus, thinking about, is it a balance or a compromise? So there's a matrix to think about low belongingness or high belongingness. We're talking about how we want to have a high sense of belonging, but that shouldn't be a compromise with people not feeling a sense of uniqueness. It may be easy for people to belong if everybody's sort of from the same background and acts the same, and it's sort of a monoculture. But we feel happiest when we get to be our unique selves, and our unique selves are honored, and there's a high sense of belongingness. Table, I think, is 9.4 in Nordhaus, lists these components of an inclusive experience. And I want you to have a critical eye toward this table. It lists, things that are important: feeling safe, feeling involved and engaged, feeling respected and valued, feeling influential, feeling authentic and whole, and recognize, attending to, and honoring diversity. And then it asks these questions. Like, for instance, under recognizing, attending to, and honoring diversity, it asks, do I treat everyone fairly and without discrimination? Do I let others know I trust and care about them? Well, some of these questions, they're hard for us to answer with total awareness and honesty because of unconscious bias. We're all biased, and in ways that we don't quite understand or are not aware of, thus the term unconscious bias. So it begins by being aware that you do have biases. Our brains are wired that way. And so we might think we treat everybody fairly and without discrimination, but we constantly need to be more aware of ways that we possibly don't. Sometimes it's subtle body language. And it's great to have a buddy, somebody that you can check in with. Am I treating people fairly? Am I treating people without bias? Here's a model from Harvard Law School, actually, that includes some really great aspects of understanding how to create an inclusive leadership model. You'll notice that the center are the leadership competencies, and on the left are the intra dimensions, what you need to do with yourself and your own personal development. And then interpersonally on the right, what are those dimensions, and what do you do with other people to create that environment? So it begins at the bottom with awareness and clarity, which I just talked about, like being aware and helping other people being aware. And part of that involves having open dialogues where we can talk about challenging issues such as race and gender, inclusivity, and perspectives. The second one is courageous accountability, holding yourself accountable and holding others accountable. Empowering others. How well are others empowered? Or how much is it a top-down organization? And reflecting with empathy, making sure that you're getting feedback from others and that you have systems for feedback in place. For instance, at the end of every meeting, have a closing round where you ask, time for feedback. How did the meeting go? What could I do better? Any comments on how we behaved during this meeting or how we upheld our values? And then innovative collaboration. The other chapter from Nordhaus for this week has to do with outgroups, and this also is about culture ultimately, right? So here's some of the research on how outgroups exist. And if you think about outgroups, you can think about groups and organizations that you've been in, and you maybe feel like you've been a part of an outgroup where you just don't quite fit in what seems to be the norms or the majority. And it's not like a minority of people necessarily is an outgroup. An outgroup are people who really kind of feel outed, and they might have positioned themselves that way. Or it might be that they're truly excluded by the larger group, and the larger group may or may not be aware of that. So one way as a leader to work with outgroups is be aware that outgroups exist. That's the first step. Often leaders are sort of unaware, and outgroups can do a ton of damage to an organization if they're not recognized. And the second one of the strategies is to show empathy. So here's one of our conflict resolution formulas. Talk with people in outgroups. Restate what you've been talking about, paraphrase what they say back to make sure that you heard them right, reflect back, and show support, offer support. And strategy 5, I just wanted to remind people of that. One of your strongest tools as a leader is those one-on-one relationships. When you become aware that there's an outgroup, that's time to really make sure that you're developing a relationship, a friendship with people in the outgroup, and helping those folks to feel like, or to know authentically, that you understand their perspective and that you're advocating for them and help that bring them into the fold, so to speak. A simple strategy, this is from the Faddist book, is having an attitude of curiosity. When people seem unhappy or when there's conflict in the air, have a sense of wonderment as opposed to defensiveness. One of the assignments this week is to craft a script of a conversation that you'd like to try having with someone that you have a little bit of conflict with. It's a chance to practice moving toward conflict. Oftentimes we're avoidant of conflict, but when actually conflict is an opportunity to build relationships and to create a more cohesive culture. And the mineral rights scripts that come from Susan Scott that are included in Moodle are really complicated, and I wanted to share with you this simplified script. And this is from her book, very, very popular book, published back in 2004. And I encourage you to check out this slide. This script involves, I'll read it. Okay, first step is, what is the most important thing you and I should be talking about? That really gets some unspoken things on the table, right? Step 2, describe the issue and what's going on relative to ? Now, you might be asking them to describe the issue, or you might describe it. Ideally, though, you're asking the questions and doing less talking and having them respond. Number 3, how is this currently impacting you, or who or what else is being impacted? This helps you understand the parameters of the situation and helps them get clear as well. And then ask them, how does this make them feel? Oftentimes when feelings are on the table, it really sort of takes out the tension out of an issue when we can express how we feel. Number 4, this is helps you both parties to understand what's at stake. If nothing changes, what are the implications? And then again, you can ask how people feel. Number 5, how have you helped create this situation or issue? Now, I encourage you, this is where you might want to step in and own up to how you have helped create the situation or issue. And number 6, what is the ideal outcome? See if they really even have an ideal outcome. Oftentimes people have identified a problem, but they're really not clear on what they think the solution is or what they really want the outcome to be. And hopefully the two of you can agree on what the outcome is. This is getting to yes, right? Really we want the same thing. If we can identify that, we might have different solutions or strategies for how to get there, but let's see if we can agree on what an ideal outcome is and how we feel about that. And then maybe we can just take one step forward. The last one is, what's one important step you can take to resolving this issue, and how can we be committed to that? I'll end with Susan Scott's secret rule, as she calls it, which are 4 points to the secret rule of fierce conversations. Interrogate reality. Really get, instead of letting your biases take over, really question what the reality is and put yourself in other people's shoes and try to see it through their reality. Provoke learning. Conflict and conversations are all about learning. Tackle tough issues. And remember, it's all about relationships and enriching those.